Well, good morning. You guys are the early birds this morning. However, it's not too early. But it's early for camp meeting. I mean, we're out camping and enjoying God's nature. I call my kids are like the chickens. You know, they go to bed with the sun and they get up. You have kids like chickens too? My kids, they'll be up at 5:30 in the morning crowing away. No sleeping in for us. And I just love my kids. They're chips off the old block. My poor wife, we're driving in the car here and they're singing some Spanish song and repeating it over and over again and singing this little harmony and just little parts, and I can watch my wife wanting to pull the hair, and I'm just laughing. I think it's hilarious. These guys, they can really, they're fun entertainment. They really are. And because I used to do the same thing when I was a kid. I don't know why we like just sound, and if it sounds funny, then we'll just repeat it and repeat it. I remember I made my mom pull over once, and she's looking for a cop, and I had my mouth stuck out the window, and I figured out when the wind blew by my mouth, I could make like a siren sound, and I was making a cop car siren, and she thought a cop actually was about to pass, and I was like, Mom, why'd you stop, and here I was just with my head out the window going, whoa, whoa, and kids, there's always doing something. And so they're a blessing. They're a blessing from the Lord. And I can't tell you that they're such an integral part of my ministry. I don't know what I would do without them. I just think what a thrill it is to have them up here singing, and how much it inspires people to see children who love Jesus. And we are blessed, very, very blessed. So yesterday we were talking about why people don't ignite. What happens? And a lot of times I would say the worst case scenario is we settle for the simulator. We settle for listening for the good stories, everybody else's miracle story, and everybody else's testimony about how they've shared Christ, but we ourselves have never done it. And so how do we start? And I want to answer some of those questions today. But before we begin, I just want to ask that the Holy Spirit will be here, and that He'll speak to each one of our hearts. It's difficult when I preach. Each one of you is a world in their own, who has a perception, a set of needs completely different. And the words that I speak, it's not just about speaking in a different language, but the Holy Spirit translates those words and brings conviction in a unique way to each heart, to each life. And that's my prayer this morning, that God will speak to the needs of each one this morning, and He will fill the needs of your soul. And He'll use me in some small way in that great mission that He has. So let's bow our heads for a word of prayer. Gracious Lord, this morning, as we open your word, as I share some of my experiences with my brothers and sisters this morning, Lord, we just pray that your Holy Spirit will be here, that you will touch and speak to each one of our hearts. Lord, that you will bring conviction, that you will show us what it is that we can do. Lord, that you will change our desires, that you will give us a passion for people. Oh Lord, we're not worthy, but you are worthy. I don't know what you see in us, but you have saw something special, so special that you were willing to leave everything to save us. Lord, we want your perspective. We want to see the same value in people around us. So this morning as I speak, Lord, touch our hearts. Speak to us, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen. As I mentioned a little bit ago that I am teaching. I teach mechanics, and the longer I've taught, I used to always kind of throw out terms and words, and I'd say things, and I realized that not everybody has the same understanding of a very common word, and so I would always take things for granted. And my students, I would say something, you get it? And they would just shake their head, yep. Uh-huh. But then I'd be like, okay, do that. And then it was quite obvious that they didn't understand what was going on. And so I've learned that sometimes we use terminologies and phraseologies and things, and not everybody understands them the same way. And marriage, of course, is the same thing. You know, simple words like yes and no to your wife is not always. I'd like it to be that way. I really wish. When we got married, I told my wife, you know, just let your yes be yes and your no be no. But, you know, it's not always. No is not always no, and yes is not always yes. But, you know, that's beside the point. But I do want to clarify a few terms and perspectives. Of course, missionary, and I mentioned this the last time I spoke, we typically think of missionaries as someone who goes overseas and, you know, is preaching to some tribe on a river, you know, wearing a gourd or feathers in their, you know, that kind of a thing. I mean, these are the missionary folk. But my perspective of a missionary, and by the way, I believe that should, somebody asked me what I do for a living, and I'm thrilled to say that I'm a missionary. But I want to tell you that we could all respond the same. Our purpose in life is to be missionaries. God, it says every child, I love the quote from Desire of Ages, it says every child is born into the kingdom of God as a missionary. We've got a phone call. Luckily, I think I've got my phone on vibrate. It could have been mine, but I think I have mine on silent mode. But I have mine charging there too, so it could happen to me. Every child is born into the kingdom of God as a missionary. We've all got a mission. And so evangelism now is it. So I just want to think, when I look out in this audience, I am talking to missionaries. You may not thought of yourself as a missionary, but you are. And so now, what do missionaries do? Well, missionaries, their purpose is to share Christ, to evangelize. We're there to, and you know, in some worlds that they kind of have that negative. Oh, wow, you're just trying to change people's customs and, you know, traditions and beliefs and make them Westerners and some thinking that way. But what we're trying to do is we are trying to exactly change customs and beliefs, but not into Westerners, but into heavenly citizens. Amen. I am not much of a, I love our country, but I'm a foreigner. I've been living as a foreigner well, we should all be living as foreigners, right? Now, when I actually went overseas, it became even more notable. I will always be a gringo in South America. I'm a tall white guy. And it's okay. That means you get the white skin tax. You know what that is? Boy, that's an extra 30% on whatever they're offering. You walk into the market and they look at you and you don't maybe speak there, especially in the beginning when I didn't speak my Spanish very well. Boy, you'd get the old white skin tax, and they just, if a tomato cost $1, well, now you're going to pay $2, you know, or $1.50, just because you stood there and you looked like a white guy, a gringo. And so, you know, and so you're just never one of them, really. And so, but now I got to be honest with you, when I come back to the States, the mentality here is quite foreign. I don't really think like Americans think. Now, it's not about freedoms, it's not about, but it's about, for example, Americans, money is a very important thing. It's something we think about, something we talk about. Entertainment is a very important thing. Lots of things, you know, and this kind of goes across the board and, you know, inside the church, outside the church. And so those things that, you know, it's not something I'm really excited about myself. And so you feel somewhat foreign. And my goal, though, is I'm happy. I want to be foreign because I really want to feel at home in heaven. I am learning to become a heavenly citizen. Now, when you live outside of America, the most notable place I've went to that people feel this way is Cuba. Cuba is just an amazing island, precious culture. Love the people. I love going to their church service and listening to them sing. Cubans have the quartets and violins, and they just have beautiful music, beautiful voices. very sociable people. They actually talk to each other still. Nobody's doing this, you know. So you can see people visiting on the sidewalks in the evenings, and you know, they still have a social life culturally. But there's one unique thing about Cuba, that I never met actually only one. I met one Cuban who was a pastor there who could come to the U.S. and has chosen to stay in Cuba as a pastor, making $19 a month. The rest of them want to go to the U.S. I mean, it is tremendous. I have met Cubans just about everywhere. I am sitting on a boat in the Amazon River, a speedboat, going south into Peru, and I'm sitting next to 26 Cubans. I was like, boys, you're going the wrong way. Yeah, I mean, you know, this boat's going south, and you guys need to go north to get to the U.S. No, no, no. They got to go south, then north. They'll go south, east, west, whichever direction they go, but they will end up here. And I thought to myself, how much are we willing to go through to become heavenly citizens? I can tell you that thinking about getting to America runs through a Cuban's mind probably every day. I'm pretty sure. They're thinking, I mean, you see all the people build boats, they try and drift across the ocean. I hear these stories of all kinds of stories of these people trying to just touch U.S. soil. That's all they've got to do. In fact, guys would get in a boat and they would jump out of the boat, and if they could grab the buoy, they could stay. And if the Coast Guard got them while they were still in the boat, they'd go back. Like 2 or 3 would get to the buoy, a couple ended up staying in the boat, and back they go. I mean, you know, you're talking about 20 days of drifting at the Caribbean Sea to get to the buoy, you know, and some made it, some didn't. But how much they're willing to do just to touch U.S. soil. But I think, how much are we willing to do to get to heavenly soil? Evangelism is preparing people to be heavenly citizens, but it's not just sharing information, okay? And maybe the next time I talk, I'm going to talk a little bit about it. It's about influence. Okay, so I think sometimes when we think about evangelism, we have all these training seminars, and we think, how can we be convincing about the state of the dead? And we use the terms like proof texts. Now, I'm not negating that we need to understand what we believe. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm going to say is that good information is not necessarily a good sign of a good evangelist or someone that's doing evangelism. Evangelism has much more to do with influence. And I'll give you an example. Have you ever met parents who have good information but no influence? You know, Johnny, he's 17. And, you know, he's hanging out with druggies. And mom and dad say, you know, Johnny, those friends you've got, not good. Bad friends. They're going to lead you down the bad path. You know, this is going to happen. X, Y, Z is going to happen. And that girl you like, she's a loser. Not a good girl. Good information. Now, Johnny's friends, though, they have bad information. Like, hey, Johnny, try this, you know. You'll be cool if we hang out and we did all this, you know, dumb stuff. And they give all the dumb information, retarded information. And which stuff does Johnny follow? The retarded stuff. They do the retarded stuff, and you're just like, why? I mean, you know, this is ridiculous. But the question is, who has the influence? You see, it's not, we think what will make us good evangelists is good information. But it's about influence. It's not about, I mean, I'm not saying that the information doesn't need to be right. That's not what I'm saying. But you can have all the right information with no influence, and you'll go nowhere. Now, of course, I think most of you here probably have heard this quote. It's in Ministry of Healing, and Christ's method alone, you've heard that one, will bring true success. What did Christ do? He mingled with the people. And he just didn't mingle with the people just to mingle. He did it as one who desired their good. And then what did he do? He won their confidence. And then bid them follow me. You know, that little process is really, really important in evangelism. And winning people's confidence, winning their, you know, and that's something I remember. At the end of our classes, we go on a mission trip, and our students organize it. They're in charge, and I cease to be a staff member and become a student. And they boss me around for a week. So they tell me, Jeff, do this, pick up that. I want you to wash the dishes. I want you to sweep, you know, it's your turn to sweep the floor, set up the tents, do this project, lead special music, you know. And whatever they want me to do, I just, yes sir, yes ma'am. But and so they organize health expos, and we do mechanics clinics and all kinds of activities, door-to-door stuff. And we go into this particular village we were going to just had an attempt to do an evangelistic series. They set up a big tent, and I think they ran about 3 nights. And the fourth morning, they arrived back to the site, and the tent was folded, the chairs were folded, the tables were put away, and they said, leave. And they left. The evangelists left. And so we were coming into a kind of a village that was somewhat resistant to Adventism. And I wasn't quite sure how it would work, but we set up with the chairman of the village, that would be like the mayor, said, we'd like to do a mechanics clinic. We were going to do these kind of, sure. And so they gave us the community center, which is right in front of the Catholic school. Now there's several denominations in there. There's Baptist, Nazarene, Jehovah's Witness. You know, there's other churches. There's an Adventist church in the community as well. And so not real sure how it was all going to work, but it was really neat as we start, because I'm not a doctor. We heard, well, some of us in the youth tent, I told a little doctor story, but I'm not much of a doctor, but I can kind of fix some things. So we do that, and I remember this man brought a chainsaw in a bag. I mean, it's just this big gunny sack, and he said, Jeff, I don't know, I just picked it up from the mechanic. The mechanic said that the lower bearing's out in it, and I dug around in the bag and pulled out this chainsaw, and my students are watching me, and I move it around, and I don't think the lower bearing's out of it. And my students like, you're going to really try and fix that thing? You know, I was like, and when they said that to me, I don't know if somehow I kind of began to develop a little identity with that chainsaw, because that's kind of how I felt. You know, I was like, is there really hope for Jeff? That guy, he's really a character. My dad said he went to the school board more for me than any of his other children, you know. And so I think my teachers would be astounded, you know, to think that I'm standing up here talking about all the things I do now. But I guess there's hope. But so I saw that old chainsaw, and I developed a affinity for it, and I said, well, let me see what I can do. So I started pulling out the parts, and sure enough, I discovered that the magneto coil, and now I'm throwing out terms I won't be able to explain, but it had fallen into the flywheel and it splayed all out, and it looked pretty rough. I thought, well, maybe I can get that, and I took a chisel, and over the next 4 days, I began to work on that chainsaw a little bit at a time. We saw 110 pieces of equipment, and if I just worked on just that one, I'd have probably took half the time. But I kind of worked on a little here and there, and so finally I got it to, when I said if I can get it to get spark, it'll probably run. And, you know, as I work on these people's equipment, I pray. And then I said, Lord, you know, give me wisdom, because I'm really not that great of a mechanic. But, Lord, give me wisdom so that I can bless these people, so that I can influence them for you. And here I am, and you know, the chairman, he came every day. It's like a guy's sport. By the way, people say, why do we have more women? I don't know if you have this problem here, but in Latin America, we tend to have more women in church than men. And I just tell people, it's real simple. Our outreach activities are geared toward women. Sure, we do cooking schools. Who comes to those? Well, I mean, I'm not saying a few guys don't come, but mostly women. Health? I mean, there's a lot of women. Yeah, and typically sick people. You know, if there's somebody who's got cancer or somebody's got some sickness, they'll come to those kind of things. But the healthy guys, Probably not. Not in Latin American culture. And so, but the mechanics clinics, I got 25 guys sitting there, and they get off, they go to this particular culture, they go to the farm at 4 o'clock in the morning, because it gets real hot there. Like, here your hottest day is like AC down there. I gotta be honest with you. It's nice. You guys got great, nice weather in the summer. So they get up at 4 and they're done by about 1. They've already made the hour trip back from their farm and eat lunch. And about 2 o'clock, they cruise on over to the community building and watch Jeff fix junk. And it's a sport. I mean, they find, I know they go to the garbage and dig out stuff just to see if I can fix it. And they say, and they'll come up to me and say, I don't know what happened, it just quit working. And I look at that thing and I'm like, yeah, right, about 10 years ago it quit working. You know, and but I look at everything. It's amazing some of the stuff that I've seen some Lazarus come to life. But this chainsaw, so my chairman, he'd make comments like, you know, I don't know how you do it. You are so patient. And I think to myself, he has no idea. I am the most impatient person ever. I have a nickname, it's Yesterday. I'm yesterday, you know, people ask me, when would you like this done? I was like, well, it's better if it was done yesterday, but whenever, the soonest you can possibly do it, the better, you know? And I'm yesterday living in the land of tomorrow, which everything's going to happen tomorrow in the lands that I live in. Very difficult for a guy whose character likes everything instantaneous. And of course, I'm severely optimistic, and I really struggle with patience. In fact, that was probably one of the most challenging things that I faced as a missionary. And in fact, the thing that I hated the most was mechanics. I got to Bolivia and I started working as a director at this high school, and the volunteers could break the stuff so fast. They'd run it out of oil, they'd dent it, they'd break it, they'd shear it off, they'd get it stuck. I mean, you can't, and I would break it too. I mean, it was just, I don't know, you want to find Jeff? Well, go look under some, you know, piece of junk somewhere. He's probably welding or screaming or kicking at it, you know, and it would make me so frustrated. You know, I'd have people who get angry. Sometimes people, get kind of frustrated with people. None of those things really bothered me. I'd have people get real angry. I had parents like, we're going to burn your house down if you kick our kid out. And I'd just turn to them and smile. And I'd say, well, there it is. Burn it down. No problem. But your son, he's got to go home, you know. Broke the rule. And anyway, I won't tell all those stories. But so patience was not one of my things. In fact, I would get so angry. I remember one day I was so angry at the Lord. I had a 7-ton truck, you know, backhoe, Jeeps, and about 4 or 5 different pieces of equipment, generators, motorcycles, and I was walking to town because everything was broken. And I was like, God, this is not cool. Why are you doing this to me, you know? And so anyway, but I'm a slow learner, and I still, I got to tell stories on myself because I can give myself permission to do that. I'm working on a little project in my shop, and I've got my mechanics student. I thought doing mechanics was difficult, but then teaching people and watching them break stuff was more difficult. But this time I did realize that watching people watch me break stuff was fairly difficult too. So I'm working on this thing, and it's just real simple. I've just got to put threads in a hole, right? And this is a little tool. You drill out the hole first, and you take this little tool and you put it in there, and it puts threads in it. Well, I got about halfway down, and the tool broke. But at this time, yeah, I was just kind of working it back and forth, but those little tools are real, they're hard, very hard, and they're actually kind of brittle. But you can't drill them out because they're so hard. So it's really kind of a catch. So I got it broken there, but at that time I'd probably been about 14 years in the mission field, so I'd learned a little bit of patience. I took a deep breath. I had another tool that was identical, and I patiently got a pair of hemostats and all these kind of things, and I finally worked it out. I said, whew. And my student was kind of watching me there, and he's like, wow, I can't believe it, that's really cool. I said, yeah, sometimes these things happen, and so I go on for my second one. And I get about 3/4 of the way down, and I got to tell you, I broke it again. Oh, now my student I just wish you would go away. Go away, little student. I'm not very happy right now. But I've got my student watching me, so I can't really blow my top and explode and, in all my fury at this thing like I would like to. But now I've broken my second tool, But I have someone in town, and I call them up on the phone. I say, quick, you mind giving me a couple more of these taps? I need, such and such a measurement, and get me 2, okay? Yeah. And I told my student, oh, it's time for lunch. Maybe you can come back and watch me later on. And so he ran off to lunch, and I got the other one out. And I thought, well, when my other person gets back here, I'll finish tapping this hole, and hopefully my student won't be here. And well, sure enough, she gets back, gets it, and I'm on my 3rd tool, and I'm almost to the very bottom, and my student shows up back again. I don't know how he knew I was down there, but he just had a homing signal, and boop, right back there watching me do that again, and I'm almost to the very end. I mean, I had just a quarter turn, and it broke again. I couldn't contain myself. I just turned around, Lord, this has always happened to me, and I want to just chuck the tool across the room. It always is like this, And my student is just like, oh, the missionary's angry. We have evaluations every month where we evaluate the students and the students evaluate us, each one. And I remember the student comes in and we have a little visit, He's like, Jeff, I didn't realize you had such an anger problem. Yeah, I do. Yeah, you don't get to, after a few years, it's gotten a little better, but it's still there. The Lord lets me know it isn't fully eradicated yet. And so when the chairman said, oh, you're such a patient guy, I just kind of chuckled to myself because he watches me. You take these little weed eaters apart and they don't run, and you put them together and you can take them apart. I can put a weed eater and take it together, take it apart and put it together in about 10 minutes, But you get really good at it because, you put this thing together and, oh, this doesn't work, and you're just trying a bunch of different things and, take the carburetor on, off, adjust it, clean it. Anyway, he's like, you are just one of the most patient people. But at the end of that Friday, I had put this chainsaw all together, and I prayed, and the owner of that chainsaw had walked through the door. He's sitting there. And I was praying. I was like, Lord, help me to help this chainsaw run. And I want to tell you, by God's grace, that old chainsaw is fired up. They don't ever start right on the first pull, especially when you have them all apart like that. But I pulled on that thing, and I'm pulling. Pretty soon it started to smoke a little bit blue, and I kept adjusting, and finally I got that old beast to fire off, and that chairman just looked, I can't believe it. I said, well, there's a God in heaven that helps us. And I handed that chainsaw back to that man. And I want to tell you that while we were doing the mechanics clinics, our students were visiting in the homes around. And you know what they would say? The people would say, are you with the people doing the mechanics clinic at the community center? Yes. Oh, come on in. And they would sing with them and pray with them. And I don't think there was a home that we didn't visit. Their students were in all the homes. And it was such a blessing. And that man that brought the chainsaw Saturday night, right before we left, I went and visited him personally in his home for about 2 hours and was able to share the gospel. And I want to tell you, it wasn't just when he got done, he asked me, well, what do I owe you? And I said, you don't owe me anything. Believe it or not, God paid me to fix your junk because he loves you. And we were visiting, and he was open to the gospel message. And why was he open? Because he really realized that I cared about him as a person. It's not just about, I don't care about him just because I want him to sit in a pew in my church. I want to see him in the kingdom of heaven. And every morning I pray that God will give me a passion for people like Jesus had. Heavenly citizens are passionate about people. Missionaries are passionate about people. So that's just a preface. I want us to get on the same page when I ask you how to start. I guess what I want to say is, where are we going? That's kind of more or less where we're going with this. But how do you start? How do you get involved? How do you start doing something? When I was a kid, my dad fixed wrecks. And one of my favorite pastimes, we'd have half a car sitting in our yard, the back half's chopped off. And I mean, we put cars together, two halves, welded them right up, made the back half was so smashed, didn't want to use it, just chop off another half of another car, you weld that right on there. Saw my dad do all kinds of stuff. But my favorite thing was to play car there when I was probably 6, 7 years old. I'd sit on an egg carton and I would drive the cars. Especially if the steering wheel wasn't hooked up. Man, that was fun. We'd spin that old steering wheel and... Have you ever tried to drive a parked car? Kind of tough. Kind of tough to steer a parked car. I know a lot of people who stay in park because they're afraid of making the wrong decision. They're afraid. What if this question, what is God's will? What is God's will? And a sermon that I preach a lot is, there's a lot of people who sit down waiting to know God's will. This is in Samuel. You know the story of Jonathan and Saul and Gibeah. Well, you're going to find out. And if you don't, do you guys remember that story? I'm going to just read it to you very, very briefly, just to freshen up your memories. It is, I want to say it's in 1 Samuel. No, is it? Yeah, 1 Samuel 14. And you're going to find in 1 Samuel 14, verse 2, it says, Saul tarried unto the uttermost part of Gibeah under the pomegranate tree, which is in Migron, and the people that were there were about 600 men, and it lists the names of them, and one of them is the son of Phinehas, the son of Eli, the priest, Lord's priest in Shiloh, wearing the ephod, and the people knew not that Jonathan was gone. So all these guys are sitting under a tree waiting on the ephod. They're waiting on the ephods. It's the two stones. I mean, how many times would I have loved to have the ephod? God, what is your will? And we get a little stone that lights up, right? But we don't have the ephod. And I think if we did, we'd be just like Saul, sitting under the pomegranate tree, waiting on the ephod. I've met lots of people who are just sitting there and doing nothing. But let me tell you, it is very difficult to steer a parked car. So I want to tell you, if you're just sitting there, this is my favorite phrase to use, get worried. That's what I tell my flight instruction students. If you're just sitting there, get worried. There's always something we need to be doing. If we keep moving, God can direct us. Oh, it says it's better to make a bad decision than no decision. Yeah, sometimes we're so fearful of doing something. Well, choosing between two good things. I've watched a lot of people do that. I don't know if I should go here or I should do this. And I'm like, you know what? Pick one. God will bless you. They're both good. Pick one. Well, what's God's will? God's will is that you pick one. Do something. That's God's will. Move. That's right. And so, but we sit there and we wonder, well, I don't know, should we do this or should we do that? No. Don't worry. God will bless you and He will guide you. So the first step to getting started is to move. That's real simple. Just pick something and do it. Don't worry about making a mistake. And how do you know what to pick? Well, I tell people, you start there by what's nearest to you. As a son of a car dealer, you learn to see opportunities. I don't know about you, who likes to get a good deal? I don't know, you ever see a good deal? I'm always got my eye out for, hey, that tool I just bought at a real cheap price, or I got this. And normally if it's a really good deal, it doesn't last for very long, right? I still remember one of the best deals that I got was actually in Bolivia. I was really excited about it. They had this old community generator sitting in a chicken coop. And I don't know how long it was sitting, but the diesel engines, they sit okay. They don't normally have too much trouble if they've sat. And it had an old Perkins diesel in it. And they just said, oh, it's no good. It's all the people have been stealing parts off of it. And I kind of looked around at it, and the only thing I saw that was missing was the starter. And so I went down and I found a starter that I could borrow, and I took my buddy over there and I said, let's just see if we can get it to fire. And if it gives it fire, boy, I'll make an offer on that generator. And so we turned it over, and sure enough, boom, it fired up. I shut it off real quick. Yep, pulled the starter back off and went to make an offer on that thing. And it's about seeing an opportunity, and of course we buy it. And that generator's still running the power at the school there in Bolivia. About 80 students at a boarding academy there that I'm still involved with. And I think I paid like $2,000 for that generator. But I was just cruising around on a visit with somebody, and I saw that opportunity. Now, my mind works that way. It's a disease, really. I'm always got, somebody says, well, that's, and when I see a deal, man, I just want to get it. And my son happens to be that way too. He'll run around, and my students that come around, he was, how old was he when he was doing the flag thing? 4 or 5. He'd be 4 or 5. He'd whip open the encyclopedia book, and he'd figure out where the students were from, and he'd draw a flag on a crayon on a piece of paper, glue it to a stick, and run around and sell it to them for $1. Made money selling flags. I thought, this guy, he's all right. He'd sell you anything. Watch out for that Indian. He's a salesman. And so he's always looking for a deal too. He's telling me about how he got these Tonka trucks at a real good deal, and then he sold them down there in Belize. He's always wheeling and dealing. So as business people and as Americans, typically our minds see money opportunities. Our minds work that way. But do we see the opportunities for souls? Remember, we're heavenly citizens, so the things that are really important are actually opportunities to share Christ. And so you really, one of the fatal errors is people are shooting way far away, thinking about the future, when the opportunity was right next to them. And they couldn't see it. It was like that generator sitting in the chicken coop. I could be on the internet. I needed a generator. This is a 25 kW generator. I needed a big one. And I'm on the internet looking in the U.S. for a good deal when the screamer deal was in the chicken coop 5 kilometers from the school. You see what I'm saying? That happens quite frequently to us. We're thinking about the evangelistic series that we could do next year when our neighbor is really wide open for the gospel. But we're not thinking in those lines. Our minds aren't in that pattern, and we're kind of more thinking about money. It's because it's our culture. It's mine. It's something that I struggle with. And it's something that I pray about. Sometimes, we're more concerned with the politics than the opportunities of sharing Christ around us. Oh, it happens right here too. It happens, and it happens with me. It's something that I have to fight against every day. Lord, help me to see the opportunities, the divine appointments that are nearest to me. I was thinking today, what can I do to reach out to the young people that are in that tent? God, you brought me all the way up here. Why am I here? Who is it that you want me to meet with today to inspire to follow you? And I will tell you that it's not, probably my most valuable opportunities are not up here. I mean, it's not that this isn't okay. This is good. But it's probably when I'm visiting with someone face to face, I'm praying with someone, what is those opportunities that I have? I was talking with, what's the name of the teacher down there? Patty. Patty said, I've got a friend. I'm studying with my neighbor. And her husband's a pilot. And my neighbor understands the gospel. She really wants to follow, but her husband, he's spiritual as well, and he thinks he understands a lot of things. So anyway, what can I do to share? Well, I'm a pilot too. Remember, the key is not information, but influence. It's interesting. Sometimes people have more, within certain groups of people, you have more influence because you have more common interests. Did you see how that works? That's why each of us has a unique mission. Each of us has a unique mission. And I remember just on this Sunday, I was talking with an evangelist, and he said, I was having a conversation with a doctor in a town in Montana, and he said, I've never been able to lead a soul to Christ. He said, really? And he was really distraught about that, and he said, I went to his office, and after he finished closing, he said, we met together, and we spoke for a while, and we prayed together, and I said, would you be willing to take me to visit some of your closer patients that you've had that you developed friendships with over the years? I'd just like to have a visit. Will you just take me with you? And so they began to visit his closer patients. And while he was there, the evangelist, he just asked them, would you like to study the Bible with us? And they turned and looked at, with the doc, and they turned and looked at the doc. You would do that? You would take time to study the Bible with us? And you know, in a very short amount of time, probably less than a week, they had over 20 Bible studies. And in the evangelistic series, they baptized 22 people, many of those, the Bible studies, that the doc. Why? Because he had influence. He just didn't realize that they would want the information that he had. And so he didn't necessarily see the opportunity, the deal that was right there under his nose. And so, you know, it's common, it happens, but we have to change our perspective. So that when I say about starting to move, the very simple, first we move and then we can pray this very simple prayer. God, give me a divine opportunity today. You know, missionary work, I do a lot of normal things, just really normal, like building, and I do a lot of abnormal things too, but I do a lot of normal things, just wrenching on busted stuff and building things and, you know, just regular life, hard work stuff. But in the middle of all those things, there are opportunities. I remember a few of them that came about that were just unique because I am who I am. And so one of the things, I have a pilot's license, and so I was catching a free ride up to the States with the Bolivian Air Force, their cargo flight. And it happened to be that we were on that cargo flight. They had to stop in Lima, and they were waiting to load up 60,000 pounds of asparagus. And while I'm waiting to load this up, I'm sitting in the cockpit of a DC-10, visiting with a colonel in the Bolivian Air Force. And we had a 2-hour Bible study in that cockpit that afternoon about the signs of the times, all kinds of subjects. His name was Ricardo, and I know that I was able to plant some seeds in that moment that the Holy Spirit will water, and someday, by God's grace, will bring a harvest. I remember another time I was in Pennsylvania. I had sold an airplane, and this guy had taken it up to another mechanic to do a pre-buy inspection on it. And the mechanic sold him an airplane that he had in his shop. And then he kind of, you know, mechanics are really good at that. They can kind of talk down someone else's thing and talk up their thing. You know, there's always, everything's got problems. But, you know, it's car dealership world. That's how, you know, I tell people it's hard. Being a mechanic and making it to heaven is a very difficult thing. But by God's grace, if God can save a mechanic, well, he can save anybody. But anyway, so this guy, and on top of it, after he sold him my airplane, he sent me a bill for $6,000. And I made a big mistake. I should have had a big deposit on that thing, and I'm just not the smartest guy. But, you know, the Lord is merciful. So here I am. I'm going up to Pennsylvania. It's December. And it's snowing. I lived in Michigan. I know about the snow, but I don't. Me and Ashley, we're on the same page there. We just don't like it. I don't like it. You know, it's cold. Now I've got the airplane's covered in snow. I don't have gloves. I don't have winter clothes. I'm in a rain jacket. I'm freezing to death. I'm clearing off all this snow off this airplane. I'm already grumpy because I'm up here in Pennsylvania picking up something that I've done stupid, and now I've got to fix it. Now I got to get back down to, you know, take the airplane back down, and I have to sell this thing. And anyway, I get lots of pressures, different ones, because I have a different airplane that, anyway, somebody loaned me some money until I sold this one, and I got to get this thing sold. And so I finally get it all cleared off. I get it started, and then a few things aren't working right. And one thing wasn't working right, and I said, yeah, that's probably going to be okay. And then another thing broke, the tachometer on the left, and I was just like, forget it. And it took me forever to get it started. Anyway, I said, I'm just going to have to stay the night here. But now I'm in the middle of nowhere. This is like one of these remote, it's not even in a town. This is this random airport out in the middle of nowhere. And I'm just like, Lord, I have no idea what I'm going to do. Well, anyway, while I was trying to fix the airplane and get it going, I met this Mennonite guy in a local hangar there, and I said, man, I think I'm going to have to stay. He says, well, why don't we go out and have some dinner? So an Air Force pilot and this Mennonite guy took me out to dinner, and we had a 2-hour dinner. But I shared about the gospel. I was able to share some amazing things with them, and I stayed the night in the Mennonite young man's house. And we were up till midnight talking about, all kinds of things. I thought, wow, Lord, you're awesome. And maybe this is why I came here. And he would take me back to the airport the next morning, but he had an egg run that he made, and he had to get up at 4 in the morning to go start his egg run. So I got up at 3:30. We got to bed at midnight, up at 3:30, over to the airport. And of course it's cold, so I climb in the airplane. Well, no, I think we figured out how to get inside. He let me inside, and I waited for the mechanic to come so I could fix my airplane and go. Well, the mechanic didn't show up till 10 o'clock. Man, talk about patience on, just all that kind of stuff just chafes me. So, and I'm kind of grumpy about the whole thing, but I am praying. I'm like, Lord, you've got me here for a reason. Let me take advantage of it. Now, I happen to know the story behind who this mechanic was. I read a little bit about it. He'd actually worked on my airplane. His father had worked on my airplane before. And when I bought my airplane, I only had copies of the logbooks. I didn't have the originals because they were in court. And his father is in prison for signing, doing some illegal stuff, signing logbooks when he shouldn't have been. And I didn't know the entire story, but I knew there was kind of something kind of going on there. And so we began a conversation with this young man. He was about my age. And, he asked me what I did, and I began to explain to him about mission work and about, serving others. And he began to tell me his story. He told me a story that his grandmother and his father were supposed Christians. And his father, to stay out of prison, was going to pin him with the deal. Say it was his fault. His father never told him. He said, anyway, he just gave this whole long story about this big saga, and that his grandfather owned the airport, and they put him in a nursing home, and all these tragic things. But they really kind of gave him a really going over, his father and his grandmother did. And he had a pretty bitter attitude. And so I began to share with him about what it meant to be taken advantage of. I've been taken advantage of a lot. And I tell him, when I get taken advantage of, you know what I think? I think, praise the Lord that I have the ability to be taken advantage of. We take advantage of Jesus all the time. And I thank Jesus, he does not treat me like I deserve to be treated. And he lets me take advantage of him. And he forgives me over and over and over again. And I began to tell him stories about, and I would tell you all these stories this morning, but we would, cruise right on into lunch. So I probably won't be able to tell you all of them right now. But he began to tell me, well, I'm trying to help out these girls. My wife runs a cheerleading thing, and their parents are druggies, and we have them over to the house, and we're trying to help them. And I took them to Walmart one time, and we were buying them some pants, and I said, hey, pick out a pair of pants. And the girl says, well, yeah, can I get 2? And he was kind of offended by that. He was like, what do they think? Am I here, I'm Santa Claus or something? I said, no, they're teenagers. They said, forget, they think everybody owes it to them. Don't worry about it. And in fact, I've had volunteers. We were working at the school, and they'd come down. I'm volunteering here teaching these kids, and these kids don't want to do their homework, and they treat me like garbage. And I'm like, dude, they're teenagers, man. They don't have brains. That shrunk and to the size of a pea and rolled out their nose a long time ago. It's going to be a while till it comes back. Probably, statistics say, I think the car rental company's got it figured out. About 25, it starts to, swell again, and it kind of starts to return, and that's when you can actually rent a car. But, I said, it takes a while, and about 30 when they've got their own kids, then they're like, whoa, man, you were really great. You did a lot for us then. I said, you're looking for thanks, you're in the wrong place. You're going to have to just love those little retards because they're retards. That's it, Oh, I do, I love them. I just love teenagers. They're just so much fun. And my wife says, you got to quit saying that. Sierra's a teenager now, and she gets a little offended by it. But anyway. a lot of times we're looking for thanks. We think we're going to be the hero missionary guy, and everybody's going to treat us great because we served them, and no one will take advantage of us. No, I said people are going to take advantage of it. But it's such a blessing to be able to bless others. In our conversation, that man began to weep in the middle of that hangar. You know what he said to me? He said, "I've never met anyone like you." And I think, praise Jesus, that means that he's seeing Christ. Because he's met a lot of people like me. But he's never met Christ before. And Christ is amazing. It's that disinterested love. That's what gains us. So, that day I could have just been in a huff. And he knew that he ripped me off. I said nothing. I just paid the check. You know why? Because I represent Christ. I represent Christ. Christ treats people well. I had a guy come in. We pulled him off the street. He was a drunk. Dried him out. Gave him a job. He worked for me for a couple years. He got baptized. And then he kind of wanted to start falling back into alcohol. And I told this guy the story. I said, "Man, bud, you got to pick. I can't have you working for me and you can't drink. You can't do both." And so he chose the alcohol. And he left. And not a week later, and just a couple months before, some people have helped him with a knee surgery that he needed. And I wasn't involved with the financial transaction, so I don't know exactly how it all worked, but they gave him about $2,500. And I don't know if we ever got the knee surgery or not, or how that went exactly, but I do know that a week after he left, he took me down to the Department of Labor and wanted his severance pay. Yep, and he sat me right there in front of the Department of Labor's office, and when I spoke with him, I asked the Department of Labor, manager there, inspector, I said, "So what do I owe him?" And she's like, "You owe him about 200 US. I said, "Sergio, here's 400. I never want you to say that I treated you badly." And, he came back a couple years later, "Oh, can I have a job?" "No, Sergio, you had your chance." But I don't sleep. I don't have burglar bars on my windows. I don't have a gun under my bed. I sleep really good at night. I treat people well. And because Christ treats us well. Christ treats us well, even when we don't deserve it. And he has blessed me and blessed me and blessed me. People take advantage and people do. It doesn't. I want to tell you that with that plane, I'm just going to give you the final story on that plane that I had sold. I sold it to that guy. The deal was $140,000. That's what I had sold it to him there. He was taking up for the pre-buy. I want to tell you that I ended up selling the plane for $160,000. The Lord is good. I never get to tell that mechanic that. He'd probably fallen over backwards. But the Lord worked it out. And each time, because our idea is to grab and to fight and to, don't do that. Jesus never did that. We represent Christ. And what we want to represent to people is Christ's love. And when we show that to them, they see something different. And we gain influence. And then the information is meaningful. Do you see what I'm saying? And so that comes from personal contact. Each day there is opportunities right next to us that we need to take advantage of. So this morning, while I'm in my bed and I'm praying and I'm asking the Lord, what are my opportunities today? Just today. I'm a dreamer. I got my head in the clouds. That's how I am. Boy, we were talking about boats yesterday, weren't we? Boy, I tell you that. Talk about having your head in the clouds. That's like way out there. Big old boat. I want a cargo ship. I think that would be cool. I like buildings. I like big tools. I like flying airplanes. I got my head in the clouds. I'm a dreamer. I'm way out there with all the stuff that I'm doing. That's Jeff. But I want to tell you something, that I can't be so far up in the clouds that I miss the guy right next to me that Jesus needs me to share Christ with. And so today I'm asking God, here I am in Maine. I don't want to have my head in the clouds thinking about all the things over everywhere else. A lot of times people are calling me, can you solve this? Can you solve that? How do we, what I normally try and do is I try and put that phone off, turn it right off. If I'm right here and dealing with people, turn it off. I'll call them back. But the opportunity is right here next to me. So we start by moving, we start by asking God for divine appointments, and we start by thinking about who is in need today that I can reach. And I want to invite you, as you think about that with me, because I got a team of energy right there in that back tent that got lots of energy that can show Christ's love to other people. And there's nothing more fun than I don't know, I kind of think about it as like driving a team of sled dogs. I've always dreamed about having sled dogs. Man, those dogs got all that energy, and you get them all pointed in the right direction. Man, that's better than a snowmobile, John, I'll tell you what. 1,000 times better. It's just herding cats can be difficult, but herding dogs is a little more possible. And so anyway, it's exciting. You can do a lot of things with those kids. It is fun. It is fun. So think about people in need, and we've got all that potential right there. We want to maximize it. So the next thing, what's nearest? So the first step is to move. The next thing is nearest. The next thing is use what you have. A lot of times we sit around thinking about, well, if I was like Jeff and I had an airplane, boy, I might do some really cool stuff. Or if I was like so-and-so and I had this, or if I had that job, that if I was a doctor, well, then I'd really be influential. Or if I was a pilot, well, then I'd be really influential. If I had money, I could do some stuff. No, it's not about what you don't have. What do you have? In fact, in 2 Kings, there's a story, and 2 Kings 4:2, and I'm just going to go with you there because it also teaches a little principle. And I hope 2 Kings 4:2. Of course, I don't have my phone on me to watch the time. I'm only a half hour over so far, or we're doing okay? I mean, we don't have any of I call them Eutychus. And luckily, it's a single story. So if there's a Eutychus here, you don't have far to fall. But let's see, 2 Kings 4:2. And we have this story is so really interesting. There's a lot of theological lessons just aside from money in this one. By the way, the verse 1, it says, cried a woman, let me just read it. Now there cried a woman of the wives of the sons of the prophets unto Elisha, saying, thy servant, thy husband is dead, and thou knowest that thy servant did fear the Lord, and the creditor is come to take him, my 2 sons, to be bondmen. Now, the context of the story is her husband had a lot of debt. And interestingly enough, it wasn't like the U.S. where you can just declare bankruptcy and just kind of whistle a little tune and walk out with nothing. There, that doesn't happen. What happens is you become a slave, or your children become slaves. And so that's typically what they start with, is they auction off your children first, and then if you still can't pay, then you become a slave. Kind of a bum deal, especially if you have a dad that's in debt, right? And then let me ask you something. If you're sold as a slave, how do you pay the debt? What do slaves get paid? Nothing. Interesting, isn't it? By the way, if you go to Hebrews 2, I'm just going to have a real quick, you mind if I just take a little rabbit trail? I'm going to just take a real quick one. I'm telling you mission stories and things that I want you to get involved with evangelism. I could get theological on you, but I'm going to do it just for a second because this is an interesting concept that a lot of people don't understand. They don't understand why sin is so addictive. If you go to Hebrews chapter 2, for then as much, verse 14, that the children are partakers of flesh and blood, he also himself likewise took part of the same, that through death he might destroy him that had the power of death, that is the devil. So who had the power of death? The devil. Used to have it. Had. And then it says, and deliver them who through what? Fear of what? Death. Were their lifetime subject to what? Bondage. Now, if you wanted to sin, like if we wanted to buy sin, if I was like, hey, John, what's the going price of oil? We'd say, well, it's what, I don't know what it is right now. Is it $40 a barrel or something? I'm not sure. But you know, it has a price. It's a commodity. So let's say we were to suppose sin is a commodity that we could just go down and buy. How much would it cost? Does anybody got a verse? How much would it cost me to buy some sin? Death. Well, it says the wages of sin is death. Now we could reverse that and say, well, the price that you're going to pay to buy a little sin is death. It's fairly expensive. And you'll notice that it says then in this verse, now you follow what I'm saying, because now if you want to live and buy some sin, then you're going to have to buy it on credit. Right? Right now we've all got a little credit going on, a credit line, so we can have some sin if we want to. And so it says that, and deliver them who through fear of death were subject. You see, no one wants to pay the bill. We could. It's easy to pay. We just got to die. Done. You've paid the bill. Finished. And it's interesting that humans, as in general, are afraid of dying. We live in fear. We see it all around us. It's amazing how much fear people have of death. It's a very fearful thing. We do a lot to try and avoid it. And so, to avoid it, they live subject to bondage. You see, if you're a debtor and you can't pay your debt, you're sold as a slave to sin. Sin is enslaving. And that's the story. You see that right there in 2 Kings 4. You see her two sons are about to be sold as slaves for a debt. And it's interesting, how are children of slaves born? Are they born free? No, it's great for the owner. More slaves. Wonderful. Well, now, Elisha says to her, what shall I do for thee? What hast thou in thine house? And she said, thine handmaid hath not anything in the house save a pot of oil. Now, I got to tell you, I've been broke before. I don't know if any of you have experienced being broke, but I've been broke before, and I have, but I've never been quite that broke. Never been quite that broke, but I have been close, but not quite that close. So all that she's got is a pot of oil, and I'm guessing that her pot probably is not full. I've just ventured to guess. And so Elisha basically says, okay, take that and use it. God is going to take what you have. It's like the little boy's lunch. Jesus could have made fish fly out of the water, leap onto the, walk across the grass. He could have done all kinds of ways to do the miracle, right? He could have just made it rain manna, but he took some kid's lunch. And he did it with that. I can't wait to meet that kid. I have kids like that come to my church. They come to church without their parents. That kid came without his parents. That lunch is not a big enough lunch for a family. That lunch is just big enough for a little kid to eat, and like he had a loving mom somewhere that packed him a lunch. And indeed, that was the case. And he went to see Jesus. Children are going to be in the kingdom of heaven. It is well worth the investment, and don't ever neglect to invest in kids. So this kid is there. Jesus uses his lunch, and this lady's got her oil. Now, what does she do to use it? So first of all, she goes and she borrows all the pots, right? And she finds all the opportunities, all the needs, and then she takes her pot of oil and sets it on the shelf, and it jumps from the pot into the other. How does it work? Or did she just have to have it in the same room and it just... No. What did she have to do? Pour it. Just keep pouring. Just remember that phrase. When you write that check, just think of it to yourself, I'm just pouring. You never feel like you feel like your bank account, your pot of oil is full? I bet you no one here does. Normally, it doesn't matter how many zeros are in that bank account behind the number. Typically, the bills that are coming down the pipe are bigger, right? And we're in a bit of a treadmill, and we're trying to figure out how in the world are we going to make it figure out. It doesn't matter if it's $100 or it's $100 million. That makes no difference. Never met a rich man that feels rich. So how do you write that check? You write it thinking to yourself, just keep pouring. And as you pour into that pot, I have, people look at the missionaries, other missionaries look at me and think, Jeff, man, what do you do? I mean, what do you do to survive? You must be doing really good. I mean, man, you fly an airplane and you've got schools going, you just bought property down there and you bought these tools and you just bought the steel and you're doing this and that and the other thing. But if you looked at my bank account, you'd be like, whoa, how do you do that again? Well, I want to just tell you the big secret. Just keep pouring. That's it. It's real simple. And you know what? I don't think it was a big gusher coming out of that pot. I think she was just pouring away, and pretty soon that pot was full and said, hand me another one. And she just keep pouring and keep pouring and keep pouring, and that you just keep writing those checks and keep blessing other people as the need comes to your door. We can't solve the whole world. Don't worry about the 1,000 pots or the other pots that are on the other side of the room. Just fill the one that's right in front of you. Just keep pouring. Sometimes we think about the bill that's coming down the pipe. My college kids are going to have college. How am I going to pay for my college for my kids? How am I going to pay the school bill? What am I going to do with my car? We kind of start borrowing all the pots from farther out across the room. But the only pot we've got to fill right now is the one right in front of us. And just keep pouring. God will do the miracle of keep filling that pot, your pot. He'll do it every day, every day, every day. This is how you get started. People ask me, well, how do you survive in the mission field? I mean, how do you support yourself? Well, I don't worry about 5 months down the road. 5 months is that's like 10 pots down the road. I don't know what's going to happen 10 pots down the road. Neither do you. But we know the one that's right in front of us in that little stream that's coming out, and we just keep pouring and filling that one. And I'll tell you, when you get to pot number 10, God's got a solution for it. He knows how to fill pot number 10 too. It's not a problem. So these are little lessons that help people get out of their parked car and just get out of park and to drive. You start with what's nearest. Pray, God, give me a divine appointment. Look for ways to influence people, to build influence with people. Find the people that you have influence with. Meet people. Meet the people next to you. I mean, it's real simple. I know chat and Zoom, and these are good. Maybe those are the people next to you, but don't ignore the ones that are sitting right next to you for the text. You got a lot more influence with the person face to face than you do on a text. I'll tell you that right now. And then use what you have. Use what you have. And the last one is real simple. It's real simple. Practice. Don't stress about it. Listen, I tell my students, you will never beat me in mess ups. I have messed up so much stuff. I have done it wrong so many times. I mean, so this steel deal that I was telling some people, I bought some steel. Had a deal. It's a deal. It was a smoking deal. I thought, man, I don't know. It was really, I bought this steel I'm building this warehouse with, and I bought it pretty much at scrap prices, but it's prime steel. So that kind of gives you an idea. So instead of being at like 65 cents a pound, I was at 18 cents a pound. That kind of more or less, that's a smoking deal. And I got it there, and I figured out that this steel was really nice steel, but really hard. Hard steel. Very hard steel, so hard I could hardly get a screw to screw in it, which was kind of a problem. Got my heart rate up, and I kind of had, like, oh Lord, I'm always doing this retarded stuff, Lord. Why me? And I had this little talk with Jesus. I used to tell you all my mistakes so you guys feel better. That's all I do it. So when you do it, you don't feel so bad, right? But then I thought, well, hard steel is good. It means it's a lot stronger. It's really strong. This is strong stuff. And then God provided me a solution with some better screws that screw in there better. And now I feel a little better about it. I've got some screws that'll screw into it. But boy, that first day when I tried to put a screw in it and it wouldn't screw, I thought, uh-oh. Normally I have them send me a little test, and I test my steel first. But it was COVID. And I was trying to take advantage of this screaming deal, and I was in another country, and I didn't know how to make it all happen, so I just pulled the trigger, and I thought, uh-oh, ruh-roh, that's not going to be good. But the Lord is merciful, and I had hard steel, but He found me harder screws, and so looks like it's all going to work out okay. But, don't be, it's all, what if I made a mistake? Which I do. I make lots of them. But God has a way to fix our mistakes. Just keep moving. Move. Park. Get out of park and drive. He'll steer you. He'll be like, hey, next time, bud, remember, get the little sample thing. That'll be a smart thing to do. Next time, remember to do this. Next time, try this. Don't worry about, oh, man, what if I say the wrong thing to my friend? Yes, it can happen, but don't give up. We're learning. We're in school. And so you just got to keep practicing. Don't let fear hold you back. God can do amazing things with each one of you. Think about, and so I want to give us a little chance right now to think about someone that you know that's close to, and something that you could do to gain influence with them. And I want to give you an example of something I have thought about for next week for me. This is for next week. While I was pouring that concrete, I had the pump truck salesman came out, and we had a wonderful conversation. He's a theologian from a non-denominational church, a pastor, but we had about an hour conversation, and it was a great conversation, but I don't want to lose his contact. And I told them when we were done, when I get my family back here and we get back in, you're coming over for dinner. I want to have you over for dinner, and we'll visit, and we'll hang out a little bit. And I want to build a relationship with Matt, right? And so he's a guy that's on my radar screen. I also have another guy that I'm renting a hangar to that I had another conversation with, and he's interested in spiritual things. He's the manager of a Mercedes semi-truck dealership. And I want to have him over for dinner. And, because he's got kids the same age as I do. And what am I doing? I'm just looking for opportunities. Have I mentioned a Bible study anywhere yet? I haven't, have I? But I would like to see those turn into things that I can do. But first of all, I'm going to build a relationship with these people. And then what I will do is I'd like to start a prayer group or a study group. A lot of times some of these are not quite ready for a personal Bible study, but they may be ready to come and just spend a little time because they're Christians, they're Christian folk. They'd like to just study the Bible together. And so I'm hoping to start a little prayer group in my area. That's kind of what my plan of attack, because I'm going to be here in the States for maybe a month or so beyond with this COVID thing. I'm not exactly sure. But now I want you to think about who is close to you that you have a few contacts with that you may be able to build some relationships with and influence. And then from that, that's where you begin to ask, do you know that right now the world is ripe? There are so many people that are searching. I mean, the world's going crazy, and people are looking for answers. I will tell you this, now is not the time to stay home and stay in park. Now is the time to be harvesting the souls that are around us. So I want to just give you a couple of minutes. Talk to your neighbor and discuss. Just right there, the person sitting next to you. I'm going to talk to my wife here. If you're in the same church, just turn around, talk to your neighbor, discuss a few opportunities that you have, and at least come up with one that's right next to you that you can share Christ. Because if I just talk about this and you guys have warm, fuzzy feelings and keep flying the simulator, I'm a complete failure. I don't want to leave here and have a bunch of simulator flyers. So we're going to just talk about it 1 minute and then a couple minutes, and then we'll close with a word of prayer, okay? So discuss.